everything that they'll possibly see, like from Western expansion up into Katrina. I give them the facts, the information, and it's my hopes that through that they have the information prior. So when I do go in, I can teach the concept. But the thing that I'm learning, and I wish I would have done this a long time ago, world history teachers, to me, I think they're vital in regards to the success of students as they get ready to enter history, because I'm teaching that class now. And it's so much flexibility. I mean, I can talk about major campaigns that relate to events leading up to World War I. Then I turn around in my second period class coming, I'm teaching on World War I. And I look at the comparison. I don't have to focus on every battle. Now, I can focus on the key concepts that led to that battle, whether it's start talking about Rommel and so on and so on. And I think that if you have that prior, if the students have that knowledge prior to coming in, then you can focus on the primary battle. You can focus on presenting the excerpts from Winston Churchill or Franklin Delano Roosevelt prior to going into the war. So even though it's hard to convey that to administrators, because the only thing they see is they come in the room, they want to see this, and they want to see how far that you get. But they don't realize that if you can take those history courses, even as far as going to Mississippi Studies, and gradually build up to that, and every history class creates a foundation. So when students come to United States history taking the state test, it's not an issue for me anymore.
I mean, that's a big gift.
Yeah,
that's a big
it
gift.
is.
We're working across the curriculum, doing sort of the graduate stuff from really 8th grade, 6th grade, really, 6th grade world history, 12th grade, etc. I mean, it's a big gift that they're going to have that prior knowledge, but I think that's something that we're trying to strive for here. I understand that there are cookies.
There's coffee and cookies out there, so feel free to get
If we
water.
could make like no more than 10 minutes, because we still have one more piece that we're trying to cover before we break today. Thank you.
The coverage question, quantity versus quality, and you love reading, I would suggest that you go back and look at this Understanding by Design book, chapter 10, to address that. In fact, one of the reasons for using this method for planning lessons is to address that whole idea. How do I do this? Where do I cut things down? What should be the emphasis? And one of the things that is suggested here, and I'm sure you've heard this from some of the people in your district, is that you want to analyze your framework. You want to look at the objectives and see what does it really mean that we're supposed to be doing. Because what happens many times is that we spend a lot of time on things that are not being taught, not being tested, or things that are not of the most importance because it's something I like as a teacher and not something that is of the importance. And if our students in Mississippi are going to do well, and if it's a goal of ours is to make sure that we are going to have our test scores go up, we have got to teach the framework, okay? We could go into a whole other discussion about whether we want to teach this is right, blah, 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 whatever. But if we want them to do well on that test, you're going to have to teach that framework. You've got to do that. The other thing that, when you're looking at that, I think we get lulled into the idea that teaching is telling. And when students listen, they're understanding. And those are false. Teaching is not telling. And listening is not understanding. So when you talk about the fact that the students being engaged, when you tell me that they enjoy something, the next thing I want to know, okay, well, what did they learn? What did they learn? Because there's a difference between enjoying something and learning. But were they engaged? Did it meet your objective? And if it doesn't meet your objective, it needs to go. It's got to get out of the way because it's taking up a whole lot of time. You've already talked about the fact that sometimes you have students that are not going to go home and do homework, okay? So my time in class is going to be very, very valuable to including some of the practice that they have to do. And part of that, it means that I have got to get them excited about what was learning and what was being discussed. And when you have students that are excited about what they're learning, then they're going to take it on their own to go back and do that. After all, where's some of those smartphones and iPad Those kids have got those things. They've got those, and if they're interested, and I can get them excited about it, they're gonna look up and know some more about them. But challenge you to go back and look at chapter 10. Use that as a way to help you weed out what's really, really important within that. And then you may want to monogram that someplace, stencil it somewhere. Teaching is not telling. Listening is not understanding.
And to that end, we're going to ask anybody who feels like you have a really solid lesson that you shared with us today. So please send that to me and to Mike so we can share it with the rest of the group. Anybody who's still in the middle of doing work, especially those of you who have student examples that you have the hard copies but you want to give back to the kids, please make copies of them and send them to us. For people who didn't have the opportunity by this session to complete the assignment, we're asking you to do that by the February workshop. Okay? So you've heard some great ideas here. I hope you've been inspired. I hope you've gotten past your fear and trepidation about taking this kind of risk. And it's also part of the grant that you're expected to produce something to get shared with other people in other parts of the state. But it's not about the test, right? It's not about us saying the test says you must produce a lesson plan. It's because, again, we're wanting you to tap into your love of this work and your love of your students, and your willingness to share this with your colleagues. And so please do that by the next workshop session, and you can talk with me or Mike offline about the details of that if you still have some questions about it. All right, so we're going to try to cover one more thing before we leave here today. And I understand some of the coaches and I have to leave here at about 3 o'clock-ish, right? Am I right about that? Okay. So you all might have to leave midstream while other people complete the work we're trying to do. How do you understand text? How do you understand primary sources? How do you help students do that? How do you tackle these vocabulary issues? How do you do small groups effectively? Some of you already do small groups effectively. I heard you talk about how you give each member of the group a role that they have to play, and they have to be accountable for that role with each other, right? For some of us, we don't use small groups very well, or we don't use them at all. We don't feel empowered to do that. We don't feel like we have the time or the space to do it. I'm going to practice a little bit today, all of these pieces, right? So you should have 2 sheets, and let me know if you don't. One that says nonfiction discussion sheet, just a one-pager, looks like this. Another is an excerpt from W.E.B. DuBois' Souls of Black Folk, from chapter 3, that we thought was particularly pertinent to the conversation today, the lecture today. And ask you individually to go through the excerpt and use the codes as you go through. So put a check mark next to things that confirm what you already thought. Put an X next to something that contradicts something that you thought. If there's something you're puzzled by, put a question mark there. If there's something that strikes you as very important, put an asterisk. Okay? So do that as you read through this excerpt. And then we're going to ask you to just turn to 3 other people right near you. So a group of 4. And there might be, I think there's an odd number. I did a quickie count, so there might be a 5th person or something. One of you takes one of these roles. Each of you takes a role. It's at the bottom of the sheet. So one of you is the connector. Another of you comes up with some discussion questions. Another person talks about some passages that really jumped out for you. And then the 4th person does an illustration. And I don't want to hear anybody say I can't draw. Okay, we did the Play-Doh exercise. You know how to do stick figures. Okay, you know how to draw. Okay. So first read through the text using the codes. And then we'll give you maybe 5-6 minutes for that. And then we'll go to the small groups, where you'll take on a role and then share with the other members of your group something. Give yourself a few minutes to come up with a discussion question, or come up with a drawing, or come up with the connection, or come up with a passage, and then share that with your group. Any questions?
Okay.